I'm Katarina Posch. I am professor at Pratt Institute. I'm professor for design history. I grew up in Austria. I'm Austrian by birth and by upbringing and by culture. I came to the United States about 15 years ago, and I have been curator and professor ever since. I like to make things. Yeah, so actually I am probably a designer myself in the deepest of my heart, but I also like to dream up things, to write about things and to make stories about things. And so this is probably why I became a design historian. Good design is always of its time because it represents what people like at this very moment, what people care about, what people would like to have, and what makes people dream. Design is more complex than style. Style is very much a surface appearance. The idea of modernity comes in various ways, in various cultures. And I would say there's a huge difference between European modernity and American modernity. European modernity, when we think about that, we very often speak about the machine age. In America, the machine age is not the right expression, because the machine age implies that we are looking at the bones of design. We're looking at the skeleton of design, and we are trying to aestheticize the bones of design. The American culture never did that. The American culture is not so much into aestheticizing the structure of a thing, but the American culture looks much more at the surface of design. And the surface of design in American modern design is what people care for. The surface in terms of feel, and the surface in terms of look. When you look at European modern design, think of, for example, Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier was speaking about the machine for living. Le Corbusier thought that a house is a structure that is just in a mechanical way for the people. But the American early designers of the same period, of the 1920s, for example, Raymond, Loewy, he thought that sheathing the structure was much more important than exposing the structure of a design, of an object, of a utensil, and making the surface look attractive. He said something very interesting. He said that a beautiful woman is beautiful on the surface. You don't want to see her bones or her flesh or her blood vessels. That wouldn't make her beautiful. Industrial design started to shift from the European model to the American model. American modernity is not so much about the structure of a thing or of a design. It's much more about the surface. The surface in terms of look and the surface in terms of feel. And Bakelite captures both of that. A very smooth feel and a look that has a lot of connotations. I think Bakelite is a very exciting material. Bakelite is a material that has changed our way we make things, our way we perceive things. When you look at Bakelite, it's a material that has such different qualities than any other material that we had before. So Bakelite speaks about and speaks of the culture that we are living in and that we've been creating for the last 100 years. Bakelite does not show the bones, and I think this is why it's so exciting. Bakelite shows us the surface, and Bakelite is an expression of the tendency of looking at a beauty that is basically skin deep. So it's not about the bones. Bakelite is not about the bones. Bakelite sheathes the structure of a design and gives us just a beautiful surface, a surface that we want to touch, a surface that we want to caress maybe, a surface that is shiny and that looks precious. Bakelite brings us the connotations of an old era through its weight, an old era through the dark color that we have, sort of a walnut color, which brings us connotations of a warm wooden interior, of a kind of an upper class surrounding, yeah, of something of a comfortable living style. But at the same time, it's a very modern material. It was the very first plastic material, and it was the first material that could be molded into different shapes. And this is what eventually led to streamlining. Yeah, without Bakelite, we couldn't have streamlined design. Though streamlining actually started with sheet metal, designers very quickly understood the limitations of sheet metal. Bakelite, by contrast, was limitless. Bakelite opened an open-ended play field for American designers. Streamlining is a design style that appeared in the 1930s in America. It came out of American Art Deco design with shiny surfaces, clear forms, but it took on then the notion of speed also into the design. That means we end up with a very elegant design language that has rounded curves, that has smooth surfaces, and that alludes to a speediness that we didn't have in any other style before. Modern people of the 1920s and 30s understood their time, their zeitgeist as being of a speedy nature. Speed was it. Being fast was an expression of being hip, of being modern, of being up to their times. It's an American style, and it's the very first industrial design style born in America. Yeah, it was born during a time of depression. It was born during a time when people didn't have much. But streamlining allowed people to see something very far down in the future and hope and aim for that. Yeah, and go for that and keep going and keep working and keep saving money and eventually being able to buy this piece of streamlined design that they always dreamed about. Bakelite was part of this process because it looked interesting enough so that people may have dreamt about it, may have seen it somewhere in the future, but it was also affordable enough so that people could eventually buy it. I think streamlining is definitively connected to the Hollywood era of the 1930s. This idea of glamour instead of real treasures, so glamour instead of preciousness. Yeah, so the ideas that something that looks beautiful, that feels beautiful, may be as important and as attainable as something made of real jewels or real ebony. So it alludes to something way more expensive than it actually is. And at the same time, it's there. You can have it as an ashtray. You can have it as a radio. You can have it as an iron. It's something that everybody can afford eventually. Bakelite democratized design. Bakelite allowed the middle class person or the working class person to own beautiful things. To own things that alluded to a grander lifestyle that probably the middle class or the working class of the 1920s could not even dream of. Bakelite was the first plastic material, and as such it invited industrial designers to think outside the box. Bakelite allowed designers to think in round forms, forms that were more plastic in the true sense of the meaning. When we think about the early industrial design in the United States, certain names pop up. Henry Dreyfuss, Norman Bell Geddes, Raymond, Loewy, Russell Wright, for example. And what unites all of these designers is that they are based in any kind of dream-making design. Most of them had an education or a previous career in stage design, so many of them have a relation to the theater. Some of them, like Raymond Loewy, comes from fashion illustration. And so all of them are in the business of dream making. Even Henry Dreyfuss, who is supposedly the most honest of the American designers, because he really wanted to work with the engineers on a piece of design, he even knew about his effect that he had in appearance. I mean, he was known as the man in the brown suit. Not because he liked brown, but he knew that he represented some serious aspect of a very new profession. Henry Dreyfuss used his brown suit as a vehicle to link the profession that was still connected to the art world to the corporate world. He wanted to be serious, and he wanted to be taken seriously, and thereby also industrial design gained a lot of prestige through his appearance. Here is a telephone designed by Henry Dreyfuss in 1937. There is an interesting connection between Bakelite design and organic design, because organic design was a biomorphic style that appeared in the middle of the 20th century. Bakelite, being so moldable, made it possible. So in the end, there's an interesting connection between life and a plastic material. Here is the ZENITH radio nurse, the first baby monitor introduced in 1937. It's an excellent example of industrial design molded in Bakelite. It was created in response to fears parents had after the Lindbergh baby kidnapping in 1932. This piece was Isamu Noguchi's first major industrial commission. Isamu Noguchi was a Japanese-American sculptor who had an amazing gift of bridging art and design. He worked not only in theater design and in sculpture, but also in landscape design and in industrial design. The radio nurse is not only a wonderful example of a piece of design that bridges over between art and design, but also between Japanese culture and American culture. When you look at it, it features at the same time the face, the abstract face of a nurse or a motherly figure, and that of a Japanese kendo mask. Here is a style book from the 1940s, from the collection of Jorge Caicedo. Out of these designs came wonderful Bakelite brooches and pins that are highly collectible. In the 1960s we had a kind of a revolution of plastics. Back then was the time when all these modern or contemporary plastic technologies developed, which allowed us to have more colorful designs, more cheaper designs, and greater variety in different design objects. Yeah? And so back then we had a real explosion in colorful plastic materials. One of the distinctive points between Bakelite and contemporary plastics is that plastics today has a cheaper connotation than Bakelite. At the same time, it also is more playful. It alludes more to a democratic attitude. Strong, seamless, flexible, lightweight, versatile, playful, fun. The dark color that Bakelite features has lived way beyond its own existence. Because when you think of electronic appearance, electronic devices, hi-fi equipment that remained dark or black well into the 1970s. And this is most likely due to the connotation of preciousness of Bakelite. Ageless perfection can be applied rather to Bakelite than to contemporary plastics. Some of the best industrial design of today owes its beauty to plastic material. Frankly, I think some of the best contemporary designs in plastics are found in the makeup industry. When you look at lipstick cases, when you look at mascara cases, they are all shiny, sleek, precious looking, and in my mind they bring us back to the elegance that Bakelite brought forward.
What does the future hold for design in plastic?
Everything. The future of industrial design resides in synthetic materials. It is essential to 3D printing, for example. Every material has a relationship to its time because, first of all, it was born out of its time and it was appealing to the people of its time. If it doesn't, or if it wouldn't, it would die. Bakelite did not die. Bakelite lived, started to live and had a very, very long lifespan. I mean, even today we're using Bakelite. Plastic is the material of dreams.
Design is blah blah blah, style is blah blah blah. That's it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Just have fun.
Okay. Here is ZENITH's baby contemporary plastics.
What gets you excited about design? It's good. No, it's fine.
My God, this is. I mean, this is more acting than lecturing.
Part of it is true. To produce.
Yeah. This would have been my next
Okay,
sentence.
all right. So, yeah.
Okay. By the end of this day, I will be perfect.